So basically today I have teams, right? I have a growth team, I have a sales team, I have an account management team. And so they're working on the 1 to 100. And then obviously I'm managing them and I'm overviewing everything that they do to make sure that things are going right. But then my co-founder and I talk 24/7 about disrupting ourselves, right? About how we can keep being ahead of the curve, not only from a go-to-market perspective, obviously, but also from a product perspective. And so doing the 0 to 1, and we love doing it.
You're listening to 0 to 1, the podcast where future unicorns get a start. Every week, we sit down with the founders actually building, the ones turning scrappy ideas into real-world companies. No fluff, no cliches, just raw insights, hard lessons, and the playbooks that VCs and top operators don't share publicly. We're your hosts, Jonathan, Matteo, and Gary, three friends obsessed with turning 0 into 1. Ready to build something legendary? Let's dive in.
On this episode of 0 to 1, we are talking with Anis Bennaceur, founder and co-CEO of Attention, the next generation sales conversational platform helping businesses achieve their full potential using generative AI. Before Attention, Anis launched Mixer, a platform designed to connect creative professionals across industries, and also worked at Tinder in its early beginning. Welcome to 0 to 1, Anis. It's great to meet you.
Thanks to meet you too, guys.
So for those who don't know you yet, can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, 100%. So I'm Anis. I'm originally French and Tunisian. I've been in New York for the past 10 years. I grew up teaching myself how to code as a teenager. I spent a lot of my early teenage years hacking web servers for fun. I went to a prépa HEC back in France, and then went to one of the top 3 business schools in France called BSCP. I had an early stint in investment banking in Paris, and then a friend of mine texts me one day and tells me, "Hey, there's this new app that's blowing up in the US. They're looking for people to help us grow it in France. They want to work with me. Would love to be working with you on this. Would you be interested?" And so he shows me that app. Well, all you had to do is swipe, and I thought that was very fun and thought about it over the summer and decided to start working with him. That app turned out to be Tinder, the dating app. There were almost no users in France, and a year later, they had a few millions of users. So I worked there helping really the app take off in France. And that just kind of like seeing the success of the founders who are there made me want to start my own startup about a year and a half later. So for me at the time, it was pretty clear that you could not really build anything meaningful in France. Things are changing today, but at the time, back in 2014, 2015, you had to be in the US to make something big. So I moved in 2015 to New York with nothing but a suitcase. And then started this startup called Mixer, which was a professional network for creatives. We were a bit ahead of our times then. You know, the creator economy really just kind of like took off 2, 3 years later, 2018, 2019. It was a great experience, right? Like, kind of think of it as like your first car that you're bumping everywhere, crashing a little bit and so on. So that was a great learning experience. And towards the end of Mixer, we had started selling subscriptions to enterprise firms like Capital One, Square, Cartier, and so on to post some job listings on the platform. And that's where I was really exposed to all the challenges of sales. So that was the best kind of like hook to go from Mixer to Attention and solve a lot of these challenges. I was also an automation nerd at the time. And I remember in July of 2020, GPT-3 coming out, and that was kind of like, my mind blowing and thinking about all the cool things that you could do with automation and restructuring unstructured data. So yeah, here we are today. Attention, we're 3.5 years old as a business. We're going to be 4 years old in September of 2025. About 55 employees. We're headquartered in New York. Series A backed over 200 customers. What else should I say? And that's the overall introduction.
Amazing. Just getting back to those early years at Tinder. So, what were the most powerful lessons that you learned at Tinder was scaling a hyper growth startup?
Not much, honestly, right? Like, I don't want to take too much credit for that. They had a great product and a great brand. And all we did then was just, when you're building a marketplace, one of the hard things to do is how do you even get things up and running? And so we just kind of like repeated a lot of the playbook that the US team had done, which is go to campuses, partner with student clubs and so on, what you call in France videos, and then just like sponsor their events and get people to show up only if they have the apps lined up and their profiles created and so on. So we did a lot of those things, right? It was back in 2013, and you didn't have really the same tools back then for growth hacking that one can have today. It was still very interesting for me to move from some finance background to getting to a tech background.
What's been the most change? The
You go from
biggest change?
you go from working 80, 100-hour weeks to working more regular hours. Now with attention back to working 80-hour weeks.
And what's the attention for users? Because you mentioned that you switched from being on Mixer, you had all that automation background that you love, and so you saw potential. So was it because what made you switch from Mixer to attention?
Yeah. Okay. So Mixer was mostly bootstrap. We were running of our own profits. We were cash flow positive, and so that meant instead of having to hire the next person, you have to think about what you can automate and how much you can automate, right? So I was using tools like Zapier quite a bit at the time, and so a lot of our last business was running on automations. And so I was getting really good at myself at building a lot of these workflows. The one big challenge was that you had a lot of unstructured data, right? Like, let's say you're having an email or a call or so on, and you need to restructure that data. Having a logic that extracts that information and rewrites it in an output that you need was extremely challenging then. And so I remember when it was on July 19, 2020, where GPT-3 comes out and you see a demo, you have access to the playground and you try to do a few things and you're pretty blown away by how you can restructure some of those words into something that makes sense to you, right? So that's when I started actually playing with AI generated emails. It was like 3 years before everyone was. And so I was building my own scripts in Python that would capture some data on the internet, then take that data, run it through the OpenAI API, and get some responses. And so that needed to really send out hyper personalized emails that scaled at the time. And I thought that this was going to be really cool. But when things were I was really debating between starting a startup in growth or a startup in sales. And one of the challenges around building a business around growth, when you're doing growth, it's all about the alpha, right? It's all about the arbitrage opportunities that you get. And you start having diminishing returns on these arbitrages over time as a lot more people start using them. And so your product is not really, it's really hard to build a product on stable foundations. Whereas when it comes to sales, your foundations are a lot more stable. Yes, it's not as sexy as doing growth, but if you can help your clients increase their conversion rates, let's say from 15% to 25% and decrease their sales cycles in terms of time to close, well, that's amazing, right? You have a stable foundation and you're really helping their top line and bottom line grow. So to answer your earlier question, right, what does attention do? We capture all of your sales interactions and then we automate a lot of that work for your teams. whether it's from a coaching and training perspective, right? Telling your reps what they're doing right and wrong, or also leadership, what your reps are doing right or wrong. Helping reps reduce admin time, right? Like filling automatically with CRM for them, writing their emails for them, telling them all of the risks on their deals immediately. That's extremely helpful. And then the last piece is leadership visibility, right? So what's your pipeline health like? What deals are going to close? How can you forecast better? And we're using all the data inputs coming from calls and emails to be able to say, what is your chance of closing a specific deal?
Just to go back on the ideation phase.
Yeah.
So from what I understand, you play with ChatGPT, you noticed how it was very good at structuring data. But for our listeners that don't have a lot of experience, a lot of business experience, or that haven't interacted with the tool that much, what will be your advice, on finding a great idea and really like using the generative AI tools at our disposal today?
Yeah. So today, I think the world's really changing a ton, right? Where we are today versus where we were 3.5 years ago when I started Attention are complete different universes. So if I were to start a business today, I'd go into a world where that I know very well and that I'm pretty passionate about, right? So that I can understand it better and be obviously thrilled to work on it every single day. I would. So you had the ability today to vibe code, right? You can just top the Lovable or Bolt and build some MVP very quickly and test them out in the market. And so that's something that we didn't have back in the day, right? So I would take a niche that it doesn't have much competition. A great tip is look at, some industries where the leaders are private equity backed companies, because those private equity backed companies are not going to be innovating as much. Or, even like a fragmented kind of like competitive space with very low NPS. And you just go in and you kind of like stitch together a solution, right? End to end. One of the last startups that I thought was really smart, where I spoke to a founder, was, the guy was building an ERP for food distributors, right? And that is like a very, very narrow vertical that he's building in. And I'm sure that's not sexy for other typical startups. So the first thing is like choose a space that A, you're interested in, and B, that you have where the incumbents are not innovating as much. The second thing is build and talk to users. That's a constant, whether it's 10 years ago, 3 years ago, today, or 5 years from now. It's just always, you should have someone who builds and someone who talks to users. And ideally, the two should be doing both, right? Just go talk to your users, see like what's broken within their current tool set, what's missing, what are some of the things where they're spending a ton of time on doing in a painful way. And one of the things around AI today is that not only AI, but also protocols like MCP now, is that you can go out, collect data really quickly. You can restructure it however you want. And so there are a lot of ways now where, if the data is broken around like 15 different tools and you have different silos and you have to stitch things together, and your customers are wasting a lot of time finding that data and stitching things together, and things are very painful, then you have some early signal for something to build, right? And so a good framework to think about this is, how much time do they spend doing these things? How often do they have to do it, right? If it's once a month, it's not as useful as if it happens like every single day, right? So how recurring the pain is, and then the cost to the business, right? Is this costing them a lot of money, or is this, not costing them as much? Because if it's the first, then you become a must-have. If it's the latter, then you're a nice-to-have. And so, yeah, that's kind of like how if I were to start a business today, this is how I would do things. And when we found early product market fit with Attention, very specifically, was when a user told us, my company would pay you a lot of money if you could fill the medic fields in Salesforce, right? And I went back to that call and I realized, oh God, so we need to do this, right? Why do we need to build medic? And the reason why is because they use this to forecast. They read what's in the fields. They understand, where an opportunity stands stage wise. And that allows them to go to their board and tell the board, this deal is going to close and this deal is not going to close. And if the CRO gets it wrong, then he looks really bad to the board, and that has dramatic consequences on leadership. And so, and well, guess how often, they do this? Like every single day, CRO goes on their Salesforce dashboard and looks at where their opportunities stand. Every single day, multiple times a day, a sales rep has to go in and fill Salesforce manually. But there's a misincentive here because the sales rep does not have anything to gain by filling Salesforce. A sales rep only cares about closing their deal. And so this is kind of like you're seeing some tension here, some misalignment in the incentives, and the recurrence of the pain and the money that can be or the cost of failure for the leadership. And that's how you start building.
Very, very great advice. So from what I understood, you didn't have clients before developing the first version. You approach people and ask them for their pain points. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, right? You try to talk to as many people as possible, right? Like I remember within a week, our first week, I talked to 35 people, right? And then over time, I just like kind of set a cadence myself to speak, to get at least 3 meetings a day, right? And it was really easy for me to get 3 meetings a day because, I was the founder myself. I was a repeat founder and people, sales leaders were interested in talking to me. So you just talk to people, you save these conversations, and then you narrow it down to the ones that you think are the most interesting or are giving you the most insight. And at the end of the day, the only thing that you should care about once you're building and once you feel like you're getting the right direction is have 5 design partners that you build for, right? And these people should be people who will say, hey, this is something that I want you to build just for me. Go out and build it for them, right? Even if it's like a very narrow use case, because what's going to happen afterwards is that maybe other people are going to have that exact same pain point, that same pain point, right? That you can try to help them with, where they're going to have like a very adjacent kind of like problem to solve. And you're going to start seeing some common use cases across your 5 best design partners.
But if you want to get those similarities between the design partners, they have to be in the same, let's say, area or sector. No?
Yeah, they could be, right? I mean, in our case for sales, they were across different industries, right? Our first design partner was in kind of like the legal tech space or HR tech space. The second one was in the sales tech space. The third one was in security. Like, it didn't really matter for us, but I think for certain other customers, like if we were building a pretty horizontal tools like across sales, right? So a lot of these sales teams would work the right way, the same way. I think that if you go after, let's say, a specific narrow vertical, then yeah, you'll need like some clients who are very similar to one another.
Okay. Because like, let's say I'm the founder of like an AI agency, so AI consulting firm, and we build like tailor-made AI agents for each company, but it's kind of hard to like just, for me, like my dream is to build a product, but like I haven't done it yet because I haven't like found the perfect like the aha moment, when like you say, okay, this is like the pain point that I've seen across multiple clients, like especially with Gen AI, I feel like, and doing service, that there's so many opportunities that it kind of gets like blurry in the end. Like you don't know where to focus and where like.
Just find one client, one person that you're gonna build for, right? I'll give you an example. We were working with a contractor that would help us with AI SEO, right? And so he did that as a service for us, and he would just generate the content for us in a recurring way. And then the guy ended up he ended up working with other logos, other companies doing the same thing. And over time, he ended up replacing his services into a product, right? He figured out how to take his entire manual workflow, turn it into a product. And now he raised a ton of money and he's going to be selling this product that he initially had as a service. That's a great way for you to find the 0 to 1.
Did you have like early signs of product market fit, or did you find product market fit yet, or?
Yeah. So product market fit, the way I define it, it's you go from no product market fit at all to early signs of product market fit. And then you tighten your product market fit as much as you can. And you can also lose that product market fit overnight, right? You can lose it or it can just get diluted. And so the way I view it is you go from no product market fit at all to early signs of PMF. And what does that mean? For us, the way we felt it was we went from our design partners or users not responding to us at all when we would reach out to for feedback to them actually reaching out to us to give us ideas and to tell us, hey, this would actually be better if you could do X, Y, Z. Or they would tell us, this is incredible. I want to keep using this every single day, right? And so you go from basically people ignoring you to people asking you or telling you what you could do better and telling you that they absolutely love your product. But that's early signs of PMF because then within your product market fit, you have to start thinking about go to market fit, right? I remember someone once told me you don't really have product market fit until you're at 20 million ARR. ARR does not really matter to matter like what PMF is, but what really matters is the customer signals that you're getting when how often they use your product, what they say about it. And actually one of the best metrics that you can try to put on top of your PMF is, your K factor, right? Like how many clients are actively referring you to other clients. It's not just NPS, right? Because people could lie about the NPS survey. It's actually about how often they're actively referring you to other clients. So that's kind of like how you're getting early
Traction.
signals, yeah, exactly, of PMF. And then within your PMF, there's also go-to-market fit, which means now you have users who love you, they're actively referring you, your price is great, not only for the clients, but also for your own margins, right? Because if you're under 80% margins, I'm sorry, or gross margin, you most likely don't have PMF because let's say you're at 30% gross margin, right? If you raise your prices to get to 80 or 90% gross margin, then you might as well lose your PMF because your clients might think you're too expensive and not want to buy you, right? And that kind of like kills your go-to-market. You really have to think well about how to get the right margins. Now, one of the interesting pieces, though, is that if you are an AI product, LLM costs are going to go down over time, so your margins could get better. But guess what? Your competitors are also going to decrease their prices as well. So you really have to think about how much your product adds value to the point where you'll still have great margins, right? So that's another piece that's extremely important that people don't really think about when it comes to product market fit. And then have you identified one or two really good channels that will allow you to scale? Because if you have competitors in the space that are getting the best customers out there and you're getting tier 3 or tier 4 clients that could churn faster because they're going to run out of money, then you don't have product market fit. You have product market fit when the best customers in the space want to start working with you.
And how'd you bring those big first clients? Because I saw that you work with Scale AI, Bamboo HR. Was it through cold emails, warm intros?
Yeah. Scale AI actually cold called our client today. I'm the one who picked up the phone and called him. And I think like a year later, we started working together. Bamboo HR, they had heard from us or about us from another customer of ours. And so, yeah, what happened is, I don't know how other startups do it, but the way we did it was we started with really small clients, right? Series A startups. And we just built for them. And then over time, we started going more and more up market, right? Every month we would push the ACVs up, we would try to work with a slightly bigger client. And that, in a way, was very painful because we start dealing with, more security related features, more enterprise related features. And so that's kind of like, I don't think, you go overnight working with an enterprise client because you're just not ready. So you have to start working with a very small client in the space and then keep going up and up and up. And so as I, reflect on our average ACVs from day one selling to today, our average ACVs have 10x over 2 years, right? And that has just been through selling to larger and larger and larger clients. They'll probably keep growing, right? And so getting back to thinking about how you're selling to certain clients, and the earliest ones good as the smallest ones. I remember one of the biggest companies, we went out of stealth early 2023, and one of the biggest companies and sexiest logos in the world comes to us inbound and wants to buy our product. And after a relatively long sales cycle, their infosec, their security team just rejects us and says, we're not going to work with any vendor that connects with our calls and customer emails. And so that killed our deal, right? And as a matter of fact, when I reflect on it today, I realized that it was all for the best because we were definitely not ready to work with that company at the time. Today we are, but back then we weren't. And so you really have to kind of like try to not punch up too early because that could kill your business.
Okay. And so what's like a good like LTV when you're starting out? Because when you haven't found like product market fit, you're looking at metrics like the lifetime value. Like what's a good lifetime value for a client? Like because we all know that some clients churn, but what's like the minimum that you should have like of LTV? Or churn rate, like what's the churn rate you should have?
Oh, churn rate. If you think from like gross retention perspective, right? Like you should try not to be. It really depends on your price point, who you're selling to. Are you enterprise? Are you SMB mid markets? It really depends. But I think you should try not to be under 85% gross retention, right? So really, what matters a lot here is also net retention. And so, if you have a certain category of clients who are churning faster than others, and, just stop serving those and focus on the ones who are going to create more lasting value, right? We know, for example, today at Attention, other clients are not as good as a fit for us anymore as larger clients. Why is that? Because we're too expensive for these smaller clients. And I still see it all the time where our sales team will tell a smaller client, look, we're not going to be a good fit for you guys because we're going to be too expensive and you need simpler tools that are out there that will be a third of our price point. And they will still insist. They will still say, hey, I want to buy your product. Your product is amazing. Hey, you have 5 sales reps. You don't need to have AI agents that automate the entire work for 5 sales reps. This actually starts making sense when you have 30, 40, 50 sales reps. And so for us, we decided to stop selling to teams that have under sales reps. It does not make sense at all, right? Those guys will come in and then say, yes, the agents are very cool, but I can actually, just re-listen to a customer call because of our volume allows us to do it. We end up telling them, I told you so, right? So really try to focus on clients who, the category of clients who are going to not only retain longer, but spend more money with you over time.
Very clear, very clear. Thank you, Anis, for those answers. And not like moving back to like how to say this, like the first your first sales.
Yeah.
So what were like, for example, the biggest objections from sales teams, and how did you overcome them? How did you, for example, respond to the feedback they were giving you and convincing them down the line to adopt your product?
Yeah. So look, the way you have to think about this is that the biggest filler of deals is not just objections. It's actually the cost of, the status quo, right? Not moving forward with anything. Because you have to remember that when you're talking to a buyer, you're actually talking to someone who has a 9 to 5 job. They may not want to have to take political risk at the company. They may have also just bought another piece of software just before and don't want to keep asking their leadership for extra favors, right? So what's going to happen is that you're going to talk to someone who's going to say, oh, wow, all of this looks amazing. And you're never going to hear back from them, right? So super early on, it's either going to have to be a numbers game where you talk to as many people as possible, or you get introductions from people, right? And if you can try to drive value for your users super early without necessarily connecting with their data, because everyone gets very, very scared of connecting their data to other tools, then that's a great first start, right? I remember one of the first companies we were going to work with at Attention was a publicly traded lending company. And the main reason why these guys wanted to work with us was simply because they looked at my LinkedIn, my co-founder's LinkedIn. They knew that we had a pretty good track record. We showed them some of the things that we could build, and they wanted us to build for them, right? And we were lucky enough to have 1 or 2 leaders at that company that were willing to make a bet on us, right? But again, it's not necessarily about overcoming objections. It's about finding that one leader who personally likes you, who wants to make a bet on you, and has enough of a good track record at the company to be saying, all right, we're going to run an experiment. We're going to try something with these guys. We think they're smart, and we think that they could solve a serious problem for us that no one else in the space is able to.
Okay, cool. And look at those like go-to-market tactics. Like, what was like the number one like channel that helped you like scale and like pass like those like early hard days to like getting you a stable revenue or a stable growth, and that it helped you like get those like first VC checks.
Yeah. When we raised our seed round, we weren't doing any revenue, right? So that we were repeat founders, right? So that was relatively easy for us. Regardless of the VC checks, we went from a handful of design partners that we were building for to growing revenue by initially community. So coming out of stealth, our funding announcement actually helped a lot to get early visibility, right? We were featured on TechCrunch. But then more importantly, for a year and a half, my LinkedIn had been connecting with people on my LinkedIn profile had been connecting with our ICP, right? And sending automated invites and so on. So people would actually start seeing my LinkedIn posts. So for an entire year, all I did was post very actively on LinkedIn, share good content. People were starting to get interested about AI. So I was starting to speak about AI and sales. I started paying some influencers to also talk about us on LinkedIn. And that allowed us to get a ton of inbound, right? But then what happens over time is you want to start going more and more market, and the types of customers that you want to start working with, they don't necessarily come inbound anymore. You have to outbound them. And so you have to start thinking about how do you go from a 90% plus inbound engine to a 50-50 inbound versus outbound split. So that's kind of like where we are today, where we're more around like 50-50.
But like, for example, nowadays, there are so many, like people receive so many emails for all types of products, especially in the generative AI space. How do you differentiate yourself and make them click on your email and move past that first step?
Yeah, don't do automated emails. It's too late.
Don't do list. You shouldn't do list. Shouldn't do instantly.
At your stage, I wouldn't think about doing email automation, right? Like, again, it's all about the alpha. I think that just try to create genuine connection with people, right? I think Guillaume Cabane at SaaStr about 2 or 3 weeks ago made a really good speech where he said, we went too far on the pendulum. People have been like abusing automated emails and no one wants to respond anymore, right? Because we all know that it's fully automated. It's pretty crappy AI generated messages that just read very lazy, right? One of the best clients that we got actually was our BDR flying out to San Francisco, going out, hand delivering something to them and sending the best possible manual email. That was huge, right? I really think that people should go back to really deeply thinking about how to send a very smart note over saying, oh, I realized you went to the same school as I did. You should try out this restaurant in your neighborhood. These things are really stupid. So no, don't do email automation. Just send out very thoughtful notes to people, showing them that that you understand their problem, you care about their problem, and that you want to have a genuine conversation with them. And your response rates will really go up. Then when you start thinking about having go-to-market team, and you should not even do this before 1 million in ARR, but once you start doing it, then yes, at that point, you can start experimenting with automation. But myself, like I would say I am pretty much an expert at automation. I still push people to go back to doing manual things and finding the best possible plays that no one has been able to do yet and automating those.
Very clear. So being genuine over using automated tool is the key. Uh, and now back to your product. I know yesterday you posted something very interesting on LinkedIn. You said that companies now have to do 0 to 1 and 1 to 100 at the same time. I was wondering how do you balance that attention and especially with the fact that there are so many different innovations coming up nowadays in the AI space. Like how do you stay ahead of the curve and really stay focused to achieve that?
So basically, today I have teams, right? I have a growth team, I have a sales team, I have an account management team. And so they're working on the 1 to 100. And then obviously I'm managing them and I'm overviewing everything that they do to make sure that things are going right. But then my co-founder and I talk 24/7 about disrupting ourselves, right? About how we can keep being ahead of the curve, not only from a go-to-market perspective, obviously, but also from a product perspective. And so doing the 0 to 1, and we love doing it. We find that super fun, right? And so we talk to customers a ton. I talk to customers every single day. My co-founder and CTO talks to customers every single day too, right? And we're always thinking about, first principles. How do we go back to building something that is way ahead of the curve, something that no one has done before and that really pays dividends? And we try to find signals through what our customers are telling us and validate these hypotheses, right? So I'll give you an example. And by the way, this is not something that early stage companies should necessarily try to experiment with, but that's something that company are at our stage is doing, which is when you get on attention, you have to configure the product quite a bit, right? You have to actually make sure that it really maps your data, your data schema, however things are structured in your CRM, however your team is actually structured. And so we've been thinking, how do we go back and just automate all of this using AI, MCP, and have just kind of like a completely AI-led onboarding, right? And those things obviously are extremely hard to figure out because no one has really done it properly, right? Just have it one click button. The whole thing kind of like reads your entire company structure, understands how your CRM is structured, and you barely have to interact with it, and everything leads you automatic, or the entire onboarding is led automatically leveraging AI. And those things are things that we're deeply thinking about because then you go from 1 week in terms of time to value to like 45 seconds or 15 minutes, right? And so those are, and I'm sure we're going to crack it. We're cracking it now actually as we speak, but I'm sure this will be the new norm for a lot of startups, AI-led onboarding in the next year or two, right? And so if you're not the one doing this, then guess what? Someone else is going to come out and they're going to do it and they're going to beat you at your own game, right? Directly within your space, but also B, the new norms are going to be happening across a lot of different industries. and your buyers are going to be comparing you to a lot of other SaaS tools that they're buying. And so it is in your responsibility as a founder to always innovate and always be best in class in what you're doing.
Very, very good advice. And especially about the comparing to other SaaS tools part. Like I was wondering, like, how do you build a defensible product so that like your buyers don't have to compare your product to another SaaS tool and really stay loyal with you?
Yeah, the best defensibility, honestly, is how deeply integrated you are with your clients, right? Like, think about, let's say you're buying, we mentioned Bamboo HR, right? Like, let's say you use Bamboo HR as for your payroll solutions, right? If a new vendor comes in and tries to sell to you, and you're already running payroll for 200 employees, and you already have a lot of workflows going around connected to Bamboo, you're not going to want to rip out that tool. You're going to keep it. It's going to be extremely difficult and annoying to have to get rid of that tool, right? So if for your customers, you're deeply integrated within their workflows, that's really, really good defensibility. Now think about the amount of these workflows and multiply them across different functions, right? Let's say now these workflows exist for sales, marketing, product, and leadership. And someone tries to take out your tool, then they're going to have to fight against all of these different teams. And it's going to be extremely difficult for them to want to get rid of you, because if you make 4 different departments and functions unsatisfied about you, then you're really fucked up, right? Then you deserve a churn.
You've also thank you so much for those like insightful feedbacks on how to build product early stage, and especially in this moving the world of AI. But now that let's get back to like the, let's say, hiring part and business part of attention. You've recruited top tier talents in the US, haven't you? And how did you convince them to join like your startup? Still a bit scrappy at the beginning, still trying to find its way. In its early days, like no product market fit. Like how do you convince like talents that have some, especially now with Gen Z and people have so much optionality, and they're always like, it's like talking to a girl, like suggesting a girl like that has 50 people DMing her every day. How do you cut the noise and like try to attract those people into joining you?
Yeah, so a few things, right? Like we're 5 days plus in office, right? Like everyone comes Mondays to Fridays, people come on Sundays, and we all work 80-hour plus a week, and we're all super super motivated grinding, and everyone is very smart at our company. And so today it gets very easy to attract good talent, because candidates interview with a talent, they see that all the guys went through Yale and, Harvard and like 2 really good schools, and they all have incredible credentials. But your question is, how do you even get the ball rolling on that? Well, first of all, I think me and my co-founder have really good credentials, right? As repeat founders, that's one of the first things that I hear from even our current head of sales, is that I knew that you guys were repeat founders. You knew what you were doing, so we were going to join you. I wanted to join you. Matthias, went through Harvard, worked at Bridgewater Associates. He's honestly, let's say, a genius, and anyone who meets him is immediately charmed. So when we interview every single candidate, they get excited about us. We have to talk to them about our vision and why we're going to be, a $10 billion plus business. And when we articulate that to them, right, like in the earliest days, it was not necessarily the easiest, but then I still remember we brought in Stu, who is our VP growth today, who used to do growth at Ramp, right? Ramp, one of the most legendary startups in the world today. Why would he leave his great job at Ramp to come and work with us? And you basically have to sell him on the vision, on the quality of the team, some of the early signals that you get, and give him a really good role, right? Hey, you're going to be our first growth person, but then you're going to have a team. You're going to be our VP growth, and you're going to be able to do a lot more things than just what you were doing before, right? And by the way, this is AI, and we have a lot of great customer traction, a lot of data points. AI is blowing up. This is where you want to do your bet your career on, right? And so that ends up becoming an easier conversation. And then when you're at the last 90% plus of convincing someone, get him to talk to your investors, right? You have investors, get them to talk to those candidates so that they convert them. They help you win them over.
Investors, like the partner at the VC that invest in you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, I always have, for example, Hadley at ENIAC Ventures, who was one of our first investors, right? They led our seed. Incredible VC, by the way. Hadley, I will always have him talk to a candidate that I really want to convince to come over. And generally that works.
You mentioned like working 80 plus hours a week. I know on LinkedIn, this is the current debate of the moment, with Irish Tabings like posting about working
It's 996.
hours. Yeah, so
Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's talking about it now. The 996.
yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it.
And it says, yeah.
But you're also French, and you understand that in France, we like work-life balance. To all our European listeners, what message would you tell them? Would you give them? Like, do you think like working 80 hours a week is the new norm, or what's your take on that?
Also, within my investment banking background, so for me, that was not really shocking, right? To work long hours, like when back in banking, when you, on average, you get home at 2 or 3 in the morning from work and then have to go back the next morning at 9. You've gone through that, you understand it. And yeah, the 996 almost looks like easy player modes compared to that. So the Americans say something here, which is, you make your money in America and you spend it in Europe. Europe is very, very fun to go in for summers or a holiday or whatever, but there's a reason why Europeans don't have the same reputation, and that's because of what you guys just said, right? Like work-life balance. Look, if you're in your 20s or 30s, fuck work-life balance. Just like work as hard as you can and make an impact on your life and be the best possible version of yourself, because you're not going to live twice. Yes, you'll make a lot of money, and then in your 40s or 50s, you'll have a lot more time to enjoy it. And by the way, you know what? In my 20s and 30s, I've also enjoyed my life quite a bit, but it's always been work extremely hard. And whenever I have some free time, then play really hard too, right? And I'm, by the way, super passionate about what I'm doing as a founder. I love working on the things I'm working on, and that is my passion today, right? And so if I have a Saturday that I'll go out and spend with friends, then guess what? Half of the time I'll still be thinking about the business because I love what I'm doing. So really, that's what you call drive and motivation. And I think that every listener in this podcast should, if you really want to build something, then you need to have that type of drive.
Interesting. Yeah. But how do you convince, like, let's say, talents in France, when you have a startup in France, to work as hard with all the regulations, and you can't fire anyone? Like, so like if how do you convince people to have that culture of like SF culture, like the grinder culture in France? How do you bring that in Europe if you had to do it?
I was looking to people who worked investment banking or consulting, like went through McKinsey, BCG, or Bain, because those people are, traditionally working very hard. But guess what? When you're starting a startup, you don't have to hire 100 people. All you need is to hire one person, and then 2 people, and then 3 people. Just like hire very, very few people. Yeah, just tell people. I actually anti-sell the business every single time I'm interviewing someone. The last 10 minutes is I tell them, this is going to be a grind. You're going to have to work 80+ hour weeks. You're going to have to work weekends. I'm going to call you on Sunday and make sure that everything is ready for next week. And I want to be really upfront and honest about it. Is this something that you're passionate about? Because if we win, we're going to win a lot. But if you're not sure about this, then there are plenty of other companies that you should go out and work at. That's it. Be honest about it. You know what? Like 3 people out of 4 will say, "Oh no, I'm not gonna do it. Screw it. Screw that. I'd rather go work at Google and work 45 hours a week. I don't want to do holidays. Yeah, you'll move on to the next people.
If all content was, let's say, disappeared from social media, and you could only give one advice to someone, what would it be? Founder.
It really depends on the topic, right? I would say if it were to be about hiring, for example, since we've just been talking about hiring, right? A few words of wisdom would be slope over intercept and quest for excellence. That's it, right? Hire people who are younger but can learn faster. So slope, very strong slope versus intercept. And quest for excellence, people who want to be the best at what they do. I'd rather hire someone who will want to be a founder in 2 or 3 years from now over someone who, just wants to coast for the rest of their lives, right? It's okay if they leave earlier from your company as long as they create as much impact as possible.
Okay, good advice. Now, just some quick fire questions to end the episode. One piece of advice that sounds like bullshit, but it's actually true.
One piece of advice that sounds like bullshit. Yeah, be passionate in what you do. Right.
Why?
Like, I have friends who tell me in French, it's l'opportunité fait le larron, which is like, just find a good opportunity and do it, and you'll be passionate if you make money. I don't believe in that. I think that if you actually are really interested in something, then you'll forge obviously your passion over time, and you'll really enjoy working on what you're working. And that means that, after multiple years or when you're having down moments or you're going through tough times, you'll still be very motivated to work on what you're working on, right? And one of the things was when I was running Mixer, hey, it was fun for me to create a network for creatives. But then what happened was that after 5 or 6 years, I was really over that world. I did not want to keep doing this. And so COVID happened, and I was realizing that I was so much more passionate on building growth workflows and optimizing sales than spending my time on the creative space, right? And I even had kind of like an imposter syndrome. I did not feel like I was the right person to go out and talk about those things. But I was so much more passionate about talking about growth and sales. And so that was also one of the things that got me to really move from one space to another. And really, if you feel like you have an imposter syndrome talking about a few things in your space, then you're probably in the wrong space.
If for someone who is young today and who wants to build an AI company, an AI startup in 2025, what will be your advice?
Look, things change a lot, but one thing stays continuous, which is talk to users and build. That's the only constant, right? Just talk to users and build. That's like, even today at, multiple millions of ARR and over 50 employees and so on, every single day I still talk to users and my co-founder still builds, right? It's just kind of like one thing that you have to keep doing. Just talk to users and build. I cannot insist enough on that. Make something that people want, right?
Who's one founder you admire and why?
Yeah, I'd say Karim and Eric Blyman, the founders of Ramp, incredible founders. Karim is an early investor in attention, and every single time I spoke to him, I was blown away by how intelligent and he is. And then never got to meet Parker Conrad at Rippling, but I think that I listened to quite a few of his podcasts, and I think he's incredibly smart and has a really good vision on things, right? Like, he's the kind of the first one who articulated the whole piece around the compound startup, which makes a ton of sense. But overall, like, he went through some really tough times at Zenefits and still built, not one, but two incredible businesses, right? When first built Zenefits, now built Rippling. Rippling has an incredible brand, and I really respect and admire Parker Conrad.
Last question. Who else do you think we should interview on 0 to 1?
Yeah, I think, okay, I would say, give me a second, actually. I met during Sasser, I met a really good French founder. He's the founder of Riot. Paul. Yeah, Ben from Riot. I think he's great. He's building a really good business.
And Americans?
Yeah, Austin at Unify. the CEO of Unify. He's great. Marty at Pylon.
Thanks. So we just get it back there. Okay. Thank you so much, Anis. It was such a great time with you. Thank you so much for your honesty. No bullshit. We were like that American culture of no bullshit, no pancette. No, no. It's very far. I think you are the person you were in banking would be very proud of you become who you become 10 years later.
Thanks, God. All right, take care.
That's it for this episode of 0 to 1. If this gave you an idea, an edge, or the courage to build, send it to your friend, founder, or your team. Follow us, subscribe, and drop us a DM if there's someone you want to hear next. Until then, keep building, keep shipping, and go from 0 to 1.